welcome. I'm Angie Butler.
It's Thursday, the 21st of May 2020, and today I'll be in conversation with book artist Kate Bernstein and Royal Astronomical Society librarian Sian.
Hi, Kate. Before you show us your book, can you tell us how you were invited to the library and a bit about creativity and curiosity and the connection with them and the library and yourself?
Yeah, sure. Creativity and Curiosity as an art science project. They launched in 2017 and they're led by two artists, Ione Parkin and Gillian McFarland. They've been working with astronomers, astrophysicists and others in this field, and they've exhibited internationally and taken part in lots of conferences and events that are related to astronomy. Occasionally they invite other artists to join them at these events or to collaborate where it seems appropriate. And that's how I got involved. In 2018, when the Royal Astronomical Society invited them to research at their library, that invitation was extended to me through Creativity and Curiosity, and I was then awarded an Arts Council grant to research and collaborate with the aims of furthering the book arts.
Okay, that's great. Thank you, Kate. I'm just going to go to the next set of slides. So now I'm going to ask Kate to show us her book. The book that she made at the RAS in collaboration with Sian is called Measuring the Heavens. So Kate's going to describe the book, tell us how it was made and give us some technical details in a slideshow. Okay, thanks, Kate.
Thank you. It's just a tour of the book, really. So the books that you can see on screen at the moment were the 5 books that I made after visiting the RAS library, and the little ones in the front are a set of each in an edition of 20. But I'm not going to talk about those today. They were the precursor to the big one, but they all deal with the importance of printing in astronomical discourse and dissemination. So that was really my way in. And then having got involved in the library, I asked Sian if she would be willing to collaborate on a book with me. And Sian's role as the librarian and archivist makes her which makes her literally the key holder and metaphorically the key holder of the library. So I really wanted to talk to her about the library itself rather than individual books, and I got quite excited about how the library worked. And so this book is a result of that collaboration, and what you're seeing is a paper book that's folded 5 panels that are hinged and folds flat, and you can just see the snake image coming out on the right. And then that sits inside the folio, which has got a sort of lens-like aperture in the front with a leather surround and leather hinging. That's bound in a very dark blue book cloth with gold imagery from the snake and from the navigation star map that it surrounds it. And then those two fold together and sit inside a drop-back box, which has the light leather leather insert with the title printed on the front, Measuring the Heavens. And then beneath the title is a raised image of a sextant, an astronomical instrument. But this is the source for the image. Sorry, there we go. Apologies, I've jumped too far. There we go. So that's the image. You can see directly the influence of it on the piece. This is from a book in the library that Sian showed me, which is a star atlas, Johann Bayer's Uranus Mirror from 1603. And the reason I liked it, apart from that it's an amazing image, is that it's the first star atlas to use Greek and Latin letters and numbers to designate the position of the stars. And so it's very, very accurate. But the images that have been created in the book are very lavish and beautiful, aesthetically very pleasing. And in my mind, I have this kind of fancy of Johann Bayer going to the print shop and talking to the printers and talking to Alexander Mayer, who did the engravings, and explaining how important it is that they're accurate and what they should look like. And then this fabulous mythological creatures, the constellations, coming in, and the two things coming together and producing this book that's very pleasing and using images that are based in ancient times with the most up-to-date astronomy possible. And then just to bring it further forward, the use of those letters and numbers to designate the star positions are still being used today. So it's a very relevant book to both contemporary times and to the past and to printing. So that was the influence that caused me to create this. This is the full 5 panels of the book standing up, and it's 112 centimeters fully extended, and the serpent is kind of moving through the air and twisting and heading towards a sphere which is made up of text and numbers from specific books in the library. And there are large versions of the coils of the serpent behind it. And the hinging of the book is quite important, but I'll come back to that. But the sources for those texts and numbers were directly from books that Sian showed me in the library. So I wanted to reference that, and almost like a mini catalogue. So I made this paper folio which goes inside the box, describes the text, and also the title on the front, which is Measuring the Heavens, a celebration of the library of the Royal Astronomical Society, London, in collaboration with Dr. Sian Prosser, archivist and librarian. And Sian really helped me with the sort of technical side of this, of getting all the names right and making sure there are, you know, the dates, because some editions come at different times, and it's quite a technical process. And then I wanted to print it in a way that referenced the inventiveness of some of the printing in the library, because in the backs of some of these books, where the printers have particular texts they want to get over, they often make them into interesting novel shapes with the font. So that's the source of that folio. But the books that are referenced there are significant because they're used in this hinging process I used in the book. So there are strips of text on the back of each of the panels, and those are the parts which fold and allow the thicker printing paper to fold flat. So the idea of those was that it references the way in which the RAS library is a kind of collective enterprise. That there's no perfect book in that library in which everything astronomical is resolved or finished. It's a really collaborative venture between astronomers, and I didn't really realize that until I began reading and looking at the library, that many theories overlap, and it's very experimental, some of it. So I wanted to make something that showed that there wasn't one perfect resolve. So, and also to show the time span of the library. So each of these strips of text refers to a particular book from the notebooks of Caroline Herschel, who's much more recent, to very early printed books. But they also came out of a conversation with Sian, where I asked Sian a lot of questions, which he very kindly tolerated. But one of them inevitably was, what are your favourite books? And this book on the left, which you can see, The Sphere of 1482, was one of them because of the binding. So hopefully you can see that there's a binding has split along the spine, and coming through that binding is a piece of medieval manuscript which has been used by the binders to consolidate the spine. And that's not an uncommon process. You find fragments like that quite a lot. But it's just very pleasing. It's a sort of layering up of both knowledge and the binder's workshop and the process. It's a little glimpse into something being made. So that split and that use of a different text was one of the sort of driving forces behind the way the book is hinged. So you can see here how with the book opening at different places, that it's designed so that you can really open it as if it were a codex, or you can open it out flat, and each page has a piece of printing on it that shows a different aspect of the books. It melds together as a whole, but it's made of different parts, which is, as I said, very much like the library. So that's one of the influences on the form of the book, and the other was the notion of discovery, really, that when you're in the library, you they're very precious, a lot of these books, and they're taken out, and Sian puts them on a cushion, and you're very carefully looking at them and holding them. But I've got no idea of what I'm going to see. So I may have asked for a book, or Sian may have suggested it, and then you turn a page and fold something out, and there's an extraordinary folded image. And I really like the way that the binders and the printers made enormous effort to get over what the astronomers wanted to describe. So this folding maps or folding images was something that influenced the form of the book. And that's this slide just shows you how, referring again to this many parts of the book that come together to create a whole. So here you can see the folio being lifted out of the box, and the book itself being opened in a variety of ways. And then the folio is printed inside and outside, and every part refers to another part but stands independently. And that was quite important to me, that it also became an artifact, that it wasn't only a book with a fixed cover. You could handle it and touch it and take it out like it's a collection in its own right. So that's in part came because the library not only has books but has an amazing collection of instruments, glass slides, and all sorts of other unexpected things in plain grey boxes. So it's a bit of a Christmas treat undoing them all. And this image, it shows the folio, front of the folio lying flat in a box, and you can see the sort of lens-like aperture which you can see printing inside the box coming through, and beneath that is a stereoscopic image of lunar photographs by Warren de la Rue. And I really liked the fact that some of the things in the library you actually have to pick up and look through to see something. And so you can see an image of Ione from Creativity and Curiosity looking at an eclipse on a glass slide on this as well. And that idea that your what's out there in the heavens has been photographed and put on this piece of glass that you then have to hold up to a light and look at maybe a century or two later is very appealing. And so that's why it was echoed for me in the cover of the folio. But that's not the only artifact that was a direct influence. There was also this sextant. When I went to see Sian, I'd got to the stage of making the book, which I didn't make. I didn't have an idea in my head that it would be complete. I didn't design the book. It kind of emerged from the book itself, then led to the folio, and that led to the box. And I wanted that progression, that discussion really between the objects as they appear, between what comes next. So I'd got to the stage of having a folio partly made and the book made, and going to see Sian and discussing what measuring the heavens really meant. And I wanted to put an instrument on the cover of the box that related to measuring, and I was coming up with an idea of sort of medieval dividers, which you see in some very early books. But Sian suggested a sextant, as they're very common. For a very long period they were used to measure at sea, and there were portable sextants and big sextants, and that's one of the main drives of the development of astronomy, was navigation. So Sian got this little sextant out of the library for me, and the artifact collection, and it's there on its perspex stand, and it's an incredibly pleasing small object, which then fits inside this shaped wooden box and tucks away inside the library. So that ended up as a sort of diagrammatic version on the front of the book under the book cloth. And then the whole came together and was displayed in the library together alongside the books that influenced it. And from the personal point of view, that was really, really lovely just to see them, have it felt like it had gone home to me. So that's a small tour of the book.
Thank you, Kate. So Sian, I'd like to ask you, when you first met Kate, did you find that you had anything in common?
Yes, we did. It turns out that we are both medievalists. We've both done master's courses in medieval studies, and we are fascinated by medieval manuscripts and the early print culture that was developing in the 15th century. And yeah, that I was really excited to learn that Kate had this research background. It's not something that in my current role, that there are there are about 50 or so pre-1500 books in the collection. We've got a couple of medieval manuscripts, but it's not my primary role to look at items from that period, but it's certainly something that I really love to look at.
So I'm just showing now a couple of those books. I wonder whether you could both talk about them and the part that they played.
Well, this is the 1482 edition of Euclid, printed by a really innovative man called Erhard Ratdolt, who was working in Venice in the late 1470s, early 1480s. And when Kate approached me researching the collections, this was one of the absolute key texts in the history of astronomy, the history of science, really, that I wanted to show her. Not just because it's important in terms of its content. You can see in the margins it's got these diagrams of, you know, different platonic solids, these special shapes that Euclid explains in great detail throughout this absolutely fundamental text in the history of mathematics. But it's also interesting because it's the first, I think it's the first, or one of the first printed scientific books. And Rat Dot solved a problem with accurately printing Euclid's diagrams in the margins, for example. He's taken the appearance of manuscript, you know, handwritten documents, and incorporated that into the actual typeface that you can see on these pages. This is something that me and Kate find absolutely fascinating, the way that manuscript culture echoes in print culture. And it's absolutely beautifully decorated. This is not hand colored, the border of this page that you can see, but these are just some of the innovations that Rat Dot was able to bring into printing. He invented the title page. He was one of the first people to do two-color printing. So I'm really glad that Kate seized on this text and incorporated it into her work.
I think it's a beautiful book, and I find it quite exciting the way the printing was pushing alongside the astronomy. So as ideas were developing, this is, I mean, Sian could tell you much more about this than in terms of history, but for me this is a very seductive book and an artist. This is the one I might have put in my pocket if Sian had let me and bring it home, because it's just amazing. It's got moving parts called volvels, which are turning, and it did have little seed pearls on the ends of the string, and it's just, there's so much work in it. Each of these wood engraving plates, I think there's 40, took about a month to make. And then I really liked it because I was reading about it and I asked Sian about the astronomical theory behind it, and she explained to me that it's the theory was surpassed. But so I thought, oh well, that's amazing, you make an amazing book and then it's redundant. But actually that's what she explained to me, was that that's not what happens. It ran along parallel with other theories for a while. So I also like the idea of all this extraordinary effort being made for something that's kind of not semi-redundant, but is adding to a sort of collection, because it's an experiment, and an experiment can't really have a wrong answer, because if it doesn't work, then that's part of the answer. So that was interesting as well.
Yeah, Peter Apian was a really notable astronomer in the 16th century. He worked for the Emperor Charles V, and he was not just an astronomer, he was a very talented printer, as you can see from this work. You know, the pictures give some of an idea of the intricacy of the volvels and the diagrams that he was using to explain planetary motions. There are several of these brightly coloured revolving discs throughout the book which show the patterns of the planets moving across the sky. So for example, the one showing Mercury's movement has got all sorts of loops across the page showing the way that Mercury appears to go into retrograde at certain points of the year. It appears to start moving backwards. And understandably, this is the 16th century, and he was basing his theory on the idea that the Earth is at the centre of the known universe, and that the planets revolve around the Earth. And I'm not an astronomer, and I came to the library as somebody who works in, you know, collections management rather than from a scientific background. But because people are always asking questions about the history of astronomy and what are the books and that you think are interesting and how do they relate to each other, that's something that I picked up along the way. That, you know, Kate's right. These debates about, you know, is the Earth or the Sun at the centre of the solar system, it went on for about 100 years before Copernicus's theory was more generally accepted in the scientific community, basically. So yeah, again, really, there's no need to dismiss out of hand the ideas in these books. It's all crucial moments in the history of science.
Great, thank you, Sian. Kate, can I ask you a little bit just to explain how the collaboration started to develop between you? You said you were invited to the RAS and you met Sian, you had things in common. So how did you start to collaborate?
When I first went along, I went with Gillian and Ione from Creativity and Curiosity, and then I began to go back on my own because when I first went, I didn't really know what I wanted to look for, so I asked Sian to look at early printed books, which was an interest. And of course, the more you see, the more you start to sort of have a way in and start to understand it. But as I said earlier, at some point, it became the library itself that began to really interest me. So I just really started to think that Sian would be the perfect person to collaborate with, but I felt quite nervous about asking her because it is quite an ask when someone's very busy. And so I emailed her, thinking that's the best way to give someone a chance to think and get out of it if they don't want to do it. And she very kindly said yes. And so we laid out our boundaries quite quickly in the email. So Sian offered me conversation and possibly a chance to exhibit if it worked out. And I said there'd be some questions, but I wanted to be the person doing the making. And that one of the things that was quite important was that she might not like what I made. And she obviously could say so, but I would still be wanting to make it in the way I wanted to make it. So we had this kind of very polite but very useful conversation on email first, and then I would go out to the RAS and Sian would get things either a result of me asking something specific or suggesting something, and I'd go up with a list of questions, and I would try to not have a sort of dogmatic list. So I would go with a list of questions which I would deliberately put out of order in a notebook, leaving gaps for possible answers, and then we'd talk, and often we'd go into talking about what the job was or how the fellows use the library now, what the importance of the library was, how the library functions. So I was trying to get a handle on what the library did, because it's a historic collection at the core of a very old society, but it's a very active, living, engaged thing. And it was just so interesting. I really enjoyed those conversations. And a lot came out, and particularly about the use of the library that I hadn't thought about before, and that turned up in the book as its sort of idea of it being a collection in a book.
And can you tell us more generally about collaboration in your practice?
Well, I haven't done it before, so it's been a really interesting experience, and like lots of artists, I've built studios and put up shows with people, but I've never collaborated directly on something that would affect the sort of aesthetic outcome. So it's I've absolutely loved it. I think the real thing that I love is that you really do have to listen and come with as little expectation of what the answer might be as possible. Obviously, you need to kind of know your own practice and say where it might go, but not be worrying about the end. And Sian would very kindly say, well, how about we put it in the cases at such and such time? I said, well, Sian, it might be crap. We just need to wait and see how worthy it might be of being in the case. So it's been lovely. I don't know if I'd have taken, if I'm honest, so well to a collaboration with another artist on the product, because that's a really hard thing to let go of if you're a maker. But in terms of working with somebody in a different discipline, I think it's been great. And Sian and I, and hopefully Gillian from Creativity and Curiosity, are going to go forward and do another collaboration, hopefully on the work of Caroline Herschel, a female astronomer, when we're allowed to go and talk to each other. So yeah, I loved it.
I loved it too.
I wondered whether you could sort of carry on where you said sort of your conversations have kind of developed along the book itself, and the physical space of the library has played an important part, and we can see that that's echoed in the structure of the book. I wondered whether I've got some more images because of the building and other books that if I show those, you could have a discussion between yourselves about them.
Sure.
So just coming up now.
Sian can tell you what this is.
Yes, I can tell you that this is a picture of the ceiling of one of the storerooms, which is referred to in the annex. I have to say I love this collaboration, and I really valued the thoughtful questions that Kate came to me with. It made me reflect on, you know, on my role, on the library, on its history and its development, and that has been so valuable. Even quite apart from the absolutely stunning finished product of Kate's creativity, that has been very important to me. These conversations. It's not been me tolerating it. I really have welcomed not just the questions, but the way Kate has listened as well. So I've just got a couple of photos here showing the annex, because I think because Kate is very sensitive and thoughtful in the way she poses her questions, I felt very comfortable about bringing her into the behind the scenes aspects of the library that I would not necessarily show to someone who's come into it for the first time. And there might be some librarians in the audience here who might know what I'm talking about the ambivalences that we can have about the spaces that we store our collections. We know that they're not perfect. We know that not everything is arranged in the way that we might ideally like it to be arranged. The annex is a space with maybe not many kilometres, but many hundreds of metres of journals that we've received from observatories all around the world over the last 200 years on exchange programmes. And we also have thousands of photographic glass plates, which are in the process of arranging. So it's a legacy project that I wanted Kate to see as part of the iceberg which is below the water in terms of what the library space really is, what the collection really is. It's not just that the main library where people can come in and read in peace and quiet and tranquility, that there's a whole lot of other stuff going on as well. And yeah, because I suppose I'm quite conscious of the state of this space that I still have to deal with in many different ways, that's why I've shown a picture of the ceiling. Also, it's a really beautiful ceiling with a sinuous shape that reminds me of the serpent constellation that appears in as the central motif of Kate's work.
Kate, do you want to say anything about the day?
It was quite scary. You get to that, well, I get to that point in my workshop and my studio where I've become quite obsessed. So I'd kind of been working on the details, and Sian and I were due to go up to the Hebrides to take part in a festival up there. So I wanted the book finished, and I wanted it finished in January. And so it felt like that last push through was very, it's quite an isolated thing to do. You feel very sort of, you know, you're on your own studio, and so you lose judgment of whether it's okay and how it works. And then taking it up to the library on the train and then bringing it into that building felt really special, because it sort of felt that's where it belonged, it's where it came from. And just unwrapping it with Sian was lovely, and just seeing it unfold onto that table in that very warm room. And then Sian went and got the book, so you can see it here in these images on display. And we put it in the case together and displayed it alongside some of the books that influenced it. And for me, that was it was the kind of closing of the circle. That was a really nice thing to do, a really nice moment. And I felt kind of honoured to have those books alongside mine. And the idea that people might come into the library to look at astronomical events, work, whatever, and then stumble across it in the way that I had found so many wonderful things there was really nice. So the unfolding was great. But yeah, I was nervous before, in case Sian didn't like it, or I thought she might be making polite noises. but it once I was there in the library with it on the table, it looked a bit like that was a really nice feeling.
You can see from the pictures that I'm probably they're probably the happiest photos of me in a professional setting that have ever been taken.
It's something else that Sian and I both hate, is being photographed. So there are a few photographs of us with the book, and we both look completely rigid. So it's nice that the actual unwrapping is a bit nicer. It's more relaxed. So.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to have to ask a last question, because time's getting on, and I'd like to give people, I'm sure there'll be lots of questions that people will have, so I want to give them time for that. But I wondered if you could both just say, you know, one thing that was really valuable about the collaborative experience of spending time together, or future possibilities, etc.
I think for me, it was an understanding that a conversation, a real dialogue, could be at the heart of your practice. So that's I feel like the lesson learned is that you can really have that open, genuine conversation with somebody and maintain your own practice, and yet engage in that way. And I'm hopeful that the next, the future collaboration that we're hopefully planning will be as interesting.
But for me, I've said before how I valued Kate's questions that prompted me to reflect. The selection of books is obviously informed by my biases and my experiences of working in the library, but I feel comfortable with that. I'm happy that Kate was able to work so creatively and productively with these books. And it's our bicentennial year in the Royal Astronomical Society, and I'm so glad that Kate was able to complete and display this book encapsulating the library as a whole: collections, archives, printed books, bases, and the subject of astronomy. I just think it was so timely. I'm really happy that it happened. That's quite a few things to take away there. It's hard to pick on one thing.
Thank you. So I think we've got to the stage in the session where I'd really like to invite anyone who has a question. If you can raise your hand using the little button down at the bottom in the middle, which just, if you raise your hand, then I can get you to ask your own question. So if you do have a question, could you do that now, please? So Damien, I see that you've got a question. Could you pop your mic on and ask your question?
No, apologies for that. I think it's just started working.
Oh, well done, Damien.
Just a very quick one. I was wondering if the RAS had a copy of Uranus Mirror, I believe it's called. I know you mentioned the Celestial Atlas, and I was wondering if you'd had a chance to look at both those two items together and maybe compare the two, and how they differ.
Yes, we do have a copy of Uranus Mirror, a set of cards depicting different constellations. It was made in the early 19th century. So, Kate, I cannot remember if I brought them out for you to look at.
You did, yeah, they're lovely.
Yes, but how would you reflect on the relationship between Uranometria and Uranus Mirror?
From memory, that the Uranus Mirror is a set of cards made to help you look at the constellations, isn't it? That you hold them up, is that right?
Yeah.
So they've got piercing, they've got the constellations printed on them, and then they've got pierced holes, and you can hold them up to a candle. I think there's quite a few sets survived with burn marks on where people got them a bit too close to the flame. I think I might be wrong, I think they're quite different in the sense that I think one was just popular use and fun, and the Uranometria was a really quite a significant, although it's very beautiful, it was a sort of significant astronomical object to use, book to use. But am I getting it right in that the Uranus Mirror was also produced by somebody who made a kind of story about who he was producing it because he didn't want to be associated with that level of popularization? Is that the right one?
Yes, my predecessor, the librarian Peter Hingley, identified the Uranus Mirror is said to have been created by a lady. It's an anonymous work, but Peter Hingley believes he's identified the author as being a fellow of the society who is a member of the clergy possibly in Leicestershire. I can't remember his name now, but if you Google Uranus Mirror, Peter Hingley, then you should be able to see the article.
Thank you. And we've got another question from Vitor as well. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right. How long did it take for the whole collaboration?
Well, I started going to the library in 2018 with Creativity and Curiosity, but I didn't start this collaboration with Sian until 2019. and it was finished in January 2020. So I think it was 7 months, 8 months, something like that. But bearing in mind, in a way, that what I'd made before was like a sort of training ground for that. It wasn't like I came in cold and only had 7 months. So there's a bit of a kind of winding up to it. But I think from first talking to Sian, it was probably about 8 months, something like that.
Thank you. Also, Kate, I've got a question for you from Susan. She says, Kate, I wondered what informed your decision to keep the book block separate from the case rather than casing in.
I did think about casing it in the form of the folding book, and it seemed to me quite limiting. And it didn't really echo that excitement of the library of taking books out of the shelves and then making discoveries. And to case it in successfully would have been really physically to stick it into the folio, and it changed the nature of your relationship with the hand. I wanted you to be able to open, take out, put back. That physical engagement with it would have been reduced in that particular book for me by having it contained in that way.
Also, I've got a question from Catherine who says it's a really down-to-earth question. Was there any funding or sponsorship involved?
So the Arts Council funded me. I applied for a grant under their one of their 2 grant forums, I think the one where you engage with the public more. I had help from Gillian from Creativity and Curiosity, who's very experienced in this process, but it was an individual grant, and they funded me for travel, studio time and research. And that enabled me to do that year of work, and it inevitably didn't by any means cover all the time, certainly not all the studio time, which was outstripped in about a week. But it was a great thing to have, and it's a process that is rather like pulling teeth, but I would go through it again. It not only did it help, obviously, having the finance, but it also helps people who are not perhaps in the art scene to feel that you've been given some kind of stamp of approval, and that does help as well. So I was grateful for the Arts Council actually for doing that, and it also promoted, part of the process of the grant was to promote the book arts into different fields. So bearing that in mind, that gave me a sense of some responsibility to go through that process as well and be aware of it.
Thanks, Kate. Sian, I've got a question for you from Bronnie. She says, does the RAS have Middle Eastern or Far Eastern astronomical material? And if so, would you consider doing a collaboration using it?
Yes, we do have Middle Eastern astronomical material. I don't think we have anything Far Eastern. So, for example, we have a very beautiful celestial globe, which I believe was made in Persia in the 18th century, and that was on loan to the Science Museum for many years, and it was returned to the RAS a couple of years ago. And we have some, again, 17th century Persian astronomical manuscripts, which I do not have any expertise in whatsoever. It's just a couple of items in the archive. In the past, some of our fellows, it seemed to be not uncommon to have an interest in astronomy and also an interest in Middle Eastern languages, and people would like translate and interpret the contents of these manuscripts. So please do get in touch with me if you'd like to learn more. The access to the library is difficult at the moment because of the building closure, but my contact details are on the website. And I suppose one thing I should say is I collaborated with Kate, and it was a privilege for her for me to be able to inform the project. But a lot of what I do is providing access to the library to anyone. It doesn't have to be a collaboration. If you have a research need that you think can be fulfilled by the library and the archives in normal times, you can make an appointment to visit. And I welcome anyone from any discipline, not just astronomers, and it's great when artists come in. So, yes, that's all I'll say for now.
We've reached 1 o'clock now. It's gone super quick. So thank you so much, Kate and Sian, for joining us today. Thanks for all your support, and thanks for UE Library as well and CFPR for making this possible. Thanks, everyone.